This first session today is really just talking about the structure of the GE and what are kind of the basic things that we need to know in order to be able to talk to students about. So a few things before we get started. Today's discussion is going to be recorded just like all of our sessions today are. So we will be able to share it out at the end, well, after today, not at the end of the day. We'll do some editing and cropping and things like that. So with an eye towards being able to kind of record this and share this out, if we can put questions in the chat so they can be answered in real time or save them until the end, that would be very helpful. At the bottom of each slide, you'll also see a little note that you can submit questions using that Go link. I don't expect you to remember it, which is why it's in the footnote or in the footer at the bottom of each slide. So that's another way that you can submit your questions, and we will make sure that we get back to you. And if you have questions about very specific advising situations in your unit or maybe situations you've faced in the past, if you email us at advising@osu.edu, we'll be happy to work with you one-on-one to talk about that specific situation. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the effort to implement a new GE was something that began in 2016. At that point, our GE hadn't really been significantly modified in several years. And so the university really wanted to implement an entirely new design or concept for a GE. The concept that we were working with at the time really hadn't been, it had been modified, but not kind of radically rethought in over 30 years. So it was time for an update and an overhaul. Part of the goals of this effort were to shrink the GE to help create space for students to do additional exploration in academic areas of interest, to add additional plans of study, to engage in promising practices and those things that we know are so valuable to students when they engage in and really help their learning. There was also a secondary goal of creating a common GE across colleges. The model that we currently use, every college more or less owns the GE. And as anybody who has ever worked with a major changer knows, a lot of the courses for the GE are kind of prescribed for the student. So it doesn't make it very portable from college to college. And so in undertaking an overhaul, we were hoping to make it easier for students who may be in the first year or two who aren't 100% sure what they want to major in, to be able to take more of their completed coursework with them into a different program. And then finally, to be able to integrate the GE throughout the student's time at the university. And so the way that students experience the GE now is much more distributed across all 4 years through things like the bookend courses. And a big part of this was so that students, even when they're in their major classes, continue to be exposed to interdisciplinary forms of thought. The advisors will recommend that students leave GEs to complete throughout all 4 years so that they're not just taking very major intensive coursework, but students kind of have their own idea how they want to move through the curriculum. And with this new design, it's much more intentional, and it's a little bit harder for students to avoid those interdisciplinary thinking experiences as they move through their curriculum. So one thing that we asked you in the knowledge check, which about 40% of the advising community completed, was to identify the GE components. And so, you know, a lot of you guys were right on. So bookend seminars is one component, thematic pathways is another component, and foundations are yet another component. There was still, I think, was a little confusion with things like, for example, foreign language. World languages is a college level requirement now. It's not part of our GE, although we do have some older images of the GE structure, which look like this, where world language is included at the bottom. So if that was something that you thought, that's totally understandable. The GE's structure begins with foundations courses, and the foundations courses are very similar to the GE that we're already familiar with, except it's been shrunk a little bit. So there's only one natural science required now. There's only one mathematical and qualitative reasoning or data analysis required right now. But we still have visual and performing arts and histories or cultures. We only have one social behavioral sciences. And so this is one of the places where we've created some space. We do anticipate the students are going to come with some of these foundations courses already completed, maybe through dual enrollment credit or through AP testing, things like that. And so another piece of the very early experience of the GE is the launch seminar. And we'll have a whole session with Dr. Beers about the kind of what we call first bookend course a little bit later. But the launch seminar really is to expose the student to the purpose of the GE and to the ways that they can intentionally utilize the learning experience and opportunities in the GE, and how to be very mindful about reflecting on what they're learning in these types of foundations courses. It's essentially an exposure to the value of a liberal arts education. The next major component of the GE is the thematic pathways. Every student is going to be required to complete a citizenship for a diverse and just world course or set of courses. And so you'll see that in the thematic pathways, it says 4 to 6 hours for each one of them. And that's because a student could take potentially a single 4-hour course, of which there are not a lot currently developed, but many have been proposed, or a sequence of 2 that are both within the same pathway. For those proposed 4-hour courses, a lot of them will be in those high impact learning practices. So courses taught in a foreign language, study abroad, research intensive courses, and things like that. So this gives the student an opportunity to get just a little bit deeper engaged in some of the types of learning themes that the university thinks is valuable. You'll notice that there is one that says open themes. There is an opportunity for faculty, staff, and students to continue to recommend additional themes to be developed and adopted by the university over time. At the beginning of spring, I think there were 8 that were being developed for consideration. And so over time, we expect to find that the number of thematic pathways will grow, in addition to just the number of theme courses that will grow as well. My understanding is that every time a theme is proposed, they also have to have identified a minimum number of courses that would fit within that theme, or of courses that they are proposing to be approved to fit into the theme. So by default, the number of theme courses will continue to grow over time. With this initial implementation, a lot of the focus has been on getting the foundations approved, because we know that students are going to need foundations courses very early. We know that a number of students will also need thematic pathways, but as we'll talk a little bit later, some students who are ready for thematic pathways may actually be better served by completing a petition to do the legacy GE curriculum. And so the last component that is not pictured here is embedded literacies. So we are used to thinking about advanced composition and statistics as part of the general education. And what employers have indicated is that students really didn't take that information and apply it to their within major learning in ways that were valuable to employers after graduation. And so the decision was made that embedded literacies, things like advanced or technical writing, things like statistics and data analysis, would move into major courses so that it really was more discipline specific, so that students were found it easier to apply that learning to their major curriculum, but then also to what it is that they are hoping to do after graduation. So we're used to thinking about this as a part of the gen ed, and it's really not a huge part of the gen ed anymore. Now it really kind of belongs to the major. And so that's a little bit different. And that's, I think, a little bit of letting go that we as advisors will have to do. So to provide you another visual about how it would look through the course of the life cycle, the students who are newer, as we said before, are going to do the launch seminar. They might have some incoming credits for some of those courses as well. They'll complete the survey course that is not different from the launch seminar, but they'll also have the opportunity to complete a lot of Ohio State courses as part of those foundations as well. In what we call the mid-career, so in my mind, that's kind of those late second year, and third year, or late first year, second year, and third year students. We're going to be seeing more themes courses. We're going to be seeing much more major supporting courses. Major supporting courses are going to be things like prerequisites for majors, maybe prerequisites for courses that are part of the major, but maybe isn't necessarily a part of the major's designated curriculum, and electives or minors or certificates. So courses that students are much less likely to bring us transfer credit for. Once we start getting into upper rank students, they will do the remaining themes courses. They'll do major courses, obviously. If they are doing minors or certificates, they'll finish those up as well. And then there's a reflection seminar that the student can take as early as the end of their third year. And the reflection seminar is that second bookend, and it will allow students to kind of reflect on their learning and development as a student and a future professional over time, and then to be able to provide evidence of their learning. And so the university has considered a lot of different, what we're calling e-portfolio tools. And within the reflection seminar, students will have an opportunity to use the e-portfolio to kind of outline that learning that they've done, so that they have a tangible portfolio of work that they can show to their future employers. So the reflection seminar, I don't think we have as much information about that as we do about the launch course, but Dr. Beers will also be working on the development and rollout of the reflection seminar as well. So just to provide a little bit of side-by-side, how are the new and legacy GEs different? In the legacy GE, majors assigned courses for some of the GE categories, and the GE was kind of independent of the major requirements. In the new GE, the required courses are part of major supporting coursework, but the core of the GE itself there's no assigned courses within that. There may be majors in which it makes sense for students to overlap specific requirements with a GE category. So for example, if the major is a science-based major, and so the student has to have at least, let's say, calculus, it would make sense for calculus to be the GE. But in order to also make the programs a little bit more transparent, the calculus would be listed as the major requirement, but maybe something like pre-calculus might be listed as a major prerequisite or a major supporting course. And it might be that we start seeing that algebra is listed in their math GE, so something like that. In the legacy, we had an overlap for diversity requirements with other GE requirements. In the new GE, overlaps with major supporting courses are allowed, with minors are allowed, major courses with embedded literacies, obviously, since that's part of the major curriculum right now. But again, we're not going to see that creep into the GE spaces that we saw with the past Gen Ed. The previous GE was 15 to 17 classes. So we were looking at about 44 or more credit hours, leaving little spaces for exploring interests or deepening knowledge in a particular area that the student has an interest in. As we know, students tend to come to Ohio State and discover interests that they didn't know. The new GE is smaller. It's on approximately 11 courses with additional space for electives. And then the themes are where we start to provide the depth in the areas of academic interest. It should also be noted that the diversity is now infused throughout several different theme areas, and having the citizenship for a diverse and just world is an area where we pay explicit attention to diversity. So we haven't removed that. We've actually made it even more of a cornerstone in the new GE. In the previous GE, your college may choose to use high impact practice coursework for open options, but in the new GE, these high impact practices are integrated into theme areas. Obviously, students can continue to use them as electives, as they've done with the previous GE, but we're being much more intentional about making sure that students have multiple places where they can engage in things like service learning, if that's something that they really want to get out of their educational experience. And then finally, in the legacy GE, we had specific advanced composition and data requirements and courses that were identified as such. In the new GE, some skills are embedded within the required coursework for the major or within the major supporting coursework. So some majors may say, I want you to take this specific statistics course, and that is going to be a major supporting course, and it's going to be your advanced statistical analysis course. Others may say, okay, we're going to infuse statistics into these 3 major courses that we already have. So it will depend on how the program has decided to meet those requirements, and CAA is evaluating all of them. So if you are a visual learner like myself, this is a matrix that shows you where GEs are allowed to overlap with program requirements. So as you can see, the minor and the GE are allowed to overlap. Secondary majors and GEs are allowed to overlap. It's not an endless overlap. There are still guardrails, as there were in the legacy GE. But within the major coursework, there's only a theme area can overlap with the major. And so programs are being evaluated. But with required non-major coursework, so these are kind of the major supporting courses, that might be where you start to see a little bit more overlap. The major core is not allowed to overlap with the GE. So that's kind of the first place where you'll see that red no overlap. I don't know if I can demonstrate that with the mouse, but that's where you're going to see that in the matrix. So this will be something we will share out the PowerPoints, and so you'll be able to refer back to this later. Okay, so what else is happening when the GE changes? There are going to be changes happening across the university. So what you'll see on the right of this slide is a visual. It's another one of the knowledge check questions where we asked, what are we going to call the GEs? And so the question was the GE that existed before autumn of 22 that we're currently on, what is that going to be called? You'll see that represented in red. The newer GE that will be implemented this fall is in purple. And then if neither of them are going to be called that, you'll see that in blue. And so many people who completed this got it right. The current GE is going to be called the legacy GE. You've already heard me use that in this presentation. The newer GE is going to be called the new GE. The legacy GE is going to be indicated as a GEL, and then the newer GE is going to be indicated as a GEN. And so that's how you'll see it in some of our SIS areas. Identified that way. So in addition to renaming the legacy GE, you'll also see that the schedule of classes has updated language. So we have general education legacy and general education new. We know that students are already aware of that because we got a lot of emails from them as they were looking at their autumn coursework. There's also been a move by the university to discontinue the digital flagship. It's going to be transforming into something that they're calling Digital Flagship 2.0. And so the distribution of iPads isn't going to be as big of a feature in Digital Flagship 2.0, but there will definitely be technology available for students who need it. But a lot of that ownership of identifying what are the appropriate tools and technologies for students are going to be distributed to colleges and departments and programs. One reason for that being that the iPad wasn't always sufficient for all programs that needed maybe very high-powered statistical or design software. Another reason for that being that there is a technical literacy, embedded literacy, and so being able to ensure that the students are familiar with that technology piece that makes the most sense for their future professional areas gives the programs a little bit more control over that. Some courses are being redesigned to meet the new expected learning outcomes for the GE categories. And so what you're going to find, and what we've already started to find, is that courses are being renumbered. Courses may be a different number of credit hours from what they were before. And they're being submitted for evaluation and approval into some of the different themes areas and foundations areas. This could have an impact on already approved transfer credit courses. And so we may see there where students temporarily are experiencing a little bit of a lag in some of those transfer courses being approved until they're being reevaluated against the newer syllabi of the Ohio State courses. And then just something to be aware of, sometime in the near future, the next maybe semester or two, there will be an update to the SIS navigation interface. It is going to be a much more responsive interface, but we do know that that's coming. And so we just kind of want you to tuck that little piece in the back of your brain that at some point you're going to hear more information about that. While we don't have a firm date, it may be late summer or early autumn, which is a time when we already know that advisors are busy. And so we're trying to get more specifics on that, but we also just wanted to let you know. So again, here's a little knowledge check question. We asked you, where did advanced composition go? And it was very easy for you guys to identify that advanced composition is now one of the categories included within the major coursework. I was a little personally disappointed that nobody fell for my that we're moving towards pictorial communication, and so we didn't need advanced composition anymore. But you know, you guys are academics and you're pros, so while I was a little disappointed, I wasn't surprised. Okay, also what's happening is that majors are having to change their curricula or modify it just ever so slightly. Again, part of that is because of this emphasis on the embedded literacies. Some schools are taking this as an opportunity to make a lot of changes, and other schools are just kind of changing those little pieces that will bring them back into compliance. So we do know that there are some schools and colleges that will discontinue their legacy curricula. Right now, we know that the College of Nursing has been approved so that all of the students in their next cohort will be on the GEN, and there will be no option for completing the GEL for those students. That has to do with their accreditation. We do know that there are other colleges and schools that are pursuing that as an option as well. We just don't know where those stand in the approval processes. So over time, we will start to find that that list is growing and growing. And then, as I've mentioned several times before, those embedded literacies are being moved into major courses or major supporting courses. And so this is actually really important to understand that this is the reason why a student is not going to be able to complete the GEL and, let's say, the new major curriculum or the GEN and the legacy major curriculum. If a student has an approved petition for completing the GEL, their major curriculum is going to also revert to the legacy program, which is the program that is currently being offered. And that as that student moves through the university, unless they are going into a program that does not offer a legacy curriculum, that any receiving college will also have to advise that student on the legacy curriculum as well. So again, in that knowledge check, we had a true false. Can a student complete the GEN with a major's legacy curriculum, as we just talked about? No, they cannot. Vast majority of you got that right. So that was really, really great to know. I feel like I'm really hammering on this embedded literacies part. We've talked about this already because the university has decided to move those into the majors. They will help students develop a specific set of skills that employers really value. And so that has been developed and embedded with them over several years. So how do we advise for these? If the student completes the major curriculum, the embedded curriculum or the embedded literacies will be all automatically met. Some majors will have designated specific courses. Others of them have modified the existing coursework, and some will create entirely new courses that will be added to these. We do know that students will change majors at kind of any point in their curriculum. So we have asked for additional guidance on what do we do if a student has maybe taken one or two embedded literacy courses in one area and moved into another area. Because it's part of the major coursework, they are going to have to take it. Students doing a double major are going to have to take embedded literacies for both programs. This is program specific. So that's something that I think we will need to just get comfortable talking to students about, to say, yes, we understand that you've already taken this advanced composition requirement, but in this program, the advanced composition is actually this other required major course. And we've had those conversations before. So hopefully that's not going to feel too unpleasant or unfamiliar to advisors as we move forward. Okay, so that's a whirlwind of information. We have lots of other topics on our radar. So the advising site has a list of questions that have been answered. It also has at the very bottom a list of questions that we are seeking additional feedback on. And so if you have noticed that you still have a question, you could certainly go there and see if we're already working on it. If you don't see it represented there, absolutely feel free to send it to us and say, hey, I was just wondering where this is in the decision. And we're also happy to give feedback about if we had any updates on the things that are already listed on the site. And so I think the thing that I'm trying to communicate here is please don't hesitate to reach out and ask us questions. We know this is a big deal change and it's not one that's very well understood yet. So we are more than happy to work with you on anything that you have a concern about.